Okay. So my name is Megan McKillop. I'm a legislative and policy advocate with the Colorado Municipal League. And today we're putting on a webinar regarding the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act, otherwise known as House Bill 1162, which passed in the 2021 the 2021 legislative session. We're putting on this webinar in partnership with Recycle Colorado and Colorado Counties Incorporated. And I see Liz Chapman, the executive director of Recycle Colorado, is here. Liz, if you just want to wave. And I believe Daphne Gervais from Colorado Counties is also joining us as our other local government partner over at the counties there. So I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping items before we get started and into this content. So we're asking everyone to please ask questions via the Zoom chat. We have over 120 people registered and participating in our webinar this morning. So it's a lot of folks to try and manage all of the questions. So if you're able to just throw those questions in the chat, we will be monitoring them throughout the presentation, and we will answer them at the end, where we will have an opportunity for a discussion and question and answer session. If you're feeling comfortable with it, please turn your video on for today's speakers so they feel like they're talking to actual people and not black boxes. That always makes Zoom webinars and virtual webinars more engaging, we think. So if you're comfortable with that, throw those cameras on. And if we don't have time to get to everyone's questions, we'll be sure to release a frequently asked question or general summary of questions asked and answered after the meeting. I also note that we are recording our webinar today, so you will be able to view this at a later date and have this information available to you afterwards. So with that, I'm going to just introduce our speakers for the day and go into a little bit of an introduction of why we're all gathered here today. So on our panel, we have Holly Pummel, Senior Sustainability Specialist in Fort Collins, along with Ashley Pace, a Senior Sustainability, also from the City of Fort Collins. We also have Jamie Harkins, the Sustainability Senior Manager at the City of Boulder, and Marty Poole, the Sustainability Manager at the City of Durango. I'll note that all three of our presenters come from a different levels in which the bag fee has been implemented in their local government. So they'll be able to offer different perspectives for you all, give you best practices, address frequently asked questions that their communities have received, and think about the ordinances that they're trying to pass in order to be in accordance with the state law. So while we're all here, and I think I don't have slides for this, but I just give a brief overview of the bill that we're discussing. So House Bill 21-1162, like I said, passed in 2021. It will institute a bag fee on plastic and paper bags, single-use paper bags, beginning January 1st of 2023. This is a 10-cent fee on both of those types of bags. And it will affect large grocery and retail stores. There's exceptions for small businesses, which we will get into later. The retailer, the store owner, keeps 4 cents of that 10-cent fee to implement this program, and municipalities and counties receive 6 cents of that fee to implement the program, enforce the law, and put money towards waste disposal, composting, and education programs. I will note that the wonky part of this legislation is that stores are not required to remit their fee until until April of 2024. So this, just to offer a little bit of background, there were amendments passed to this bill late in the session in the second chamber, and I think it was just an error by the drafter that didn't change all of the timelines. So because that was missed, there's a technicality issue there that stores don't have to remit to cities until 2024. However, and we'll get into all of this in more detail, that does not mean that cities cannot be prepared to accept fees from the stores going forward. There's nothing in the law that preempts that from happening. So we want to be clear, and we'll be able to answer those questions regarding that specific piece of the bill in more detail when we get to the question and answer section of our bill. There's also, as part of this bill, a polystyrene or styrofoam ban that begins in January of 2024. However, we're mostly focused on the plastic bag fee and ban in today's webinar, so I won't get into those details. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Holly and Ashley with the City of Fort Collins.
Thank you, Megan. It's great to be with you all today and discuss what is going to be happening across the state. So a little bit of grounding, just comparing, Fort Collins has a local ordinance that went into effect on May 1st, 2022. And I just want to show how that relates to the state, since we did have opportunities to do some alignment. So first, ours is only impacting large grocery stores in our community. And what that entails is over 10,000 square feet and more than 4 of your typical grocery store departments, like produce, meat, deli, like all those kind of things. Whereas the state impacts more retailers. So those franchises, those chains, the big box stores is a lot of the ones who are getting impact. So we had a start date of May 1st, and then in this state law, there is the staggered implementation. So as Megan described it already, it starts in 2023 and then in 2024. We kept the 10-cent fee for each paper bag, and in this case, for the state law, the plastic bag in the first phase and the 60 and 40 split. For ours, we banned plastics immediately. So that was immediate ban. Our grocery stores are only providing paper bags or they are going bagless, where this one has bags banned later in the phase and then polystyrene containers. Another thing that we kept of our own is keeping the income qualified programs exempted from the 10-cent fee. So this is from the local to the federal level, and they can include anything from food assistance programs to our local like FOCO income insurance programs. Next slide, please. So engagement is kind of crazy. You have to talk to the businesses that are being impacted as well as the community. So for the community, we are planning to do some tabling events. This is partnerships through different organizations. We're going to be working with the Poudre Library District in Fort Collins. A goal of ours is to make reusable bags out of old t-shirts as a fun way of like sharing how to reuse and also have something to be used when you're shopping. We will also be redistributing reusable bags that were gently used and donated to us through bag roundups that we did over the summer, which is another way for us to connect to how we can be a reuse and sharing economy, as well as following this new state law. And then we'll be distributing some other reusable bags. As for impacted businesses, which we will be sharing this information with everybody, we're going to have a resource website. And in this website, we'll have short informational videos on what does this mean to a grocer. So, or not a grocer, but impacted businesses. This is anything from remitting to what it will look like in their stores. We will also be doing a video for the community side to understand what it looks like on their end. How do you go through the line? What are the ways that you can get through the line, whether it's going bagless, whether it's paying for the bags? We want to show that. We will also be working with some business associations that are related to the retail and hospitality services in our community. I think it's a good way for us to share information and for them to, meet them where they're at and answer their questions in a bigger group where they can share out. We're also looking into doing some office hours. Office hours would be made by appointment by these businesses and give them some time to ask us questions that they weren't asked on our website with frequently asked questions or the other resources that we provide. We will also have an opt-in and opt-out form. And this form will let us know if we've missed any businesses or if any of the businesses that we've contacted through sending a mailer have any other questions or need any more information. Partnerships have been essential, from implementing our local ordinance to getting through this state law. So the biggest thing is these impacted businesses. Like I said, we will be sending a mailer. So this mailer will include when this starts, getting them to our website, and really starting that connection with them. Other partners that we have are community organizations. In this case, we worked with two community organizations through an agreement where they were paid for their services to distribute bags. We worked with community connectors that focus in the Latinx and Hispanic communities. And then we also worked with Care Housing in Fort Collins that focuses on low income and moderate income households. It is important that we hit these marginalized groups so we're able to give them the information they need, but also meet them where they're at and work with the organizations that are already there. We also will be working with the library, like I mentioned, and other groups within the city. And my favorite part, working with you all and other cities and communities and counties. It's important that we share information and collaborate in this space since it is a state law and there is some confusion with it. We also work deeply with internal partners, including our sales tax and revenue office, economic health office, and our neighborhood services, and plenty more beyond that. It is a whole team effort within a city to get this up and going. Enforcement. So we have an enforcement plan for our disposable bag ordinance, but really our biggest goal and the goal of our compliance officer, Linda Harden, is to really educate and support these businesses where we can. Education first, enforcement second. So how we're doing this is for our local ordinance, we had meetings with these grocers. We let them know what it was, what was going to happen, how it was going to impact them, and what kind of support we were going to provide. We're continuing to do that through our business resource and other opportunities for them to seek our support and answer questions. Getting into more of the details of enforcement, for compliance checks, we're looking at checkout stands, self-checkout stands for plastic bags. If they have them, they wouldn't be compliant in this point. If they have paper bags and how they're using them and making sure that they're imposing the charge on the customers. And that should be on their delivery receipt. So we're still working through aspects of this, but this is our first steps of really understanding this. Other ways that we make sure that stores and impacted businesses are going to be compliant is if they're remitting their bag fees to us. If they're not remitting them on time, they would not be in compliance. And remitting is telling the total and then remitting the 60%. Other opportunities that feel a little bit more indirect and some indirectly is how they can report through our different service lines. So we have Access Fort Collins, we have our nuisance hotline, we have our service area requests, emails, direct phone calls, anything that you can think of, we have that available for them to make sure that if it's a business, that it's a neighboring business, a community member, or a worker who's having an issue of how this is being implemented in the stores, that we'll know about it. So other parts of the enforcement process. Like I said, education is important. So we would send an educational letter, just letting them know what we're hearing and what we're seeing and how we can support and moving forward to be in compliance. If through that letter, they end up not following through with anything we discussed, we would move into a notice of violation. And then if they fall on against that, they would receive a citation. And we have fees that go along with these citations. Next slide, please. So on a best practice standpoint, I think this is a very important aspect of it. So first is collaborating with partners. Be in the community. To ask questions, get those partners information so they know how to best prepare in the areas that they work in. That's been a huge success for us. Translating all outreach materials. We have English and Spanish materials, and that's the same for our feedback survey. We do an English and Spanish version. We find this very important and good to know what your community looks like and how you can best reach all aspects of our community, especially our most marginalized communities. A wide-reaching communications campaign. We recognize that in our disposable bag campaign, it was essential for us to be visible anywhere we could be, whether it was digitally or a hard copy in a store or coffee shop. We wanted to be visible and we wanted them to see. Something that we learned is a lot of shoppers in Fort Collins would learn about our local ordinance through going to the store and doing the act. So it was important that we best prepared them and we had the communication and signage that was needed. Another great way, and I think that whenever we're asking people to do a sustainable behavior change, it's great to bring an action with an incentive. So we were giving away free reusable cotton bags throughout the spring. We did over 20 events and distributed over 10,000 bags. It was an awesome opportunity to be in the community and provide something that was going to be used for them. And we got so many thank yous and appreciations for this. On the challenging sides, I won't say that any of this implementation is easy. It is not. There are aspects of it that are difficult. There's aspects that are very awesome and incredible to experience. The first being, which you all might notice in your own home and everywhere else, is supply chain issues. We noticed from our grocers, and they told us that supply chain has been difficult for paper bags and reusable bags. And essentially what this means is there's issues with availability and when they can get here, quality and quantity, and just anything on between. Other things that we've noticed is bags without handles, and that can be an accessibility issue. Accessibility is essential in how we're using and how we implement these types of laws and how we communicate that to people. We're really working on understanding how that can be improved so the experience is different. Self-checkout. Self-checkout is definitely a different beast of itself compared to our checkout lanes, but is part of the changing progresses of grocery stores of how they are as a business. Things that we're seeing on the occasion, people are not putting the amount of bags they have. We've noticed that some stores have said, do you wish to use reusable or to use paper bags? That can be really confusing and make it not as clear of what it should be. So that's an area that through an educational letter, we're working through to improve on. We're also trying to understand how we can better serve folks that are exempted from the 10-cent fee. We've heard a lot of feedback on showing proof can be a barrier for them. And we don't want to put barriers when that was supposed to be a helpful thing of having exemptions. And then I'm going to turn over the communication piece to Ashley.
Hello all, I'm Ashley Pace. I'm also a senior sustainability specialist with the City of Fort Collins, but I focus primarily on communications, which is why Holly's turning it over to me at this time. So our last area of challenge that we've noticed is a communications challenge here. Not only do we have different rules in different places in different municipalities, but we also have our local ordinance and our state policy, and trying to marry some of the differences there and communicate that effectively to both shoppers and to businesses that will be affected. So we have two audiences here, affected businesses and shoppers. And then we also have a couple of different things that we want our shoppers to do. And I'll go into that more in the next slide. And then, like I said, different rules for different municipalities and trying to make it clear for everyone who's affected. Next slide. All right, so this is a snapshot of our communications strategy. And I know it's tiny, it's not necessarily meant for you to be able to see every line, but this is what we presented to our senior leadership when we were deciding how are we going to communicate this and where do we need to put some money behind our communications tactics so that we're effectively reaching an equitable distribution of our community. So here we have in our no cost category, these are all of the native content mediums, tactics out there. So city newsletters, utility bill, or utility news, other department newsletters, press releases, social media, all of the things that don't really have a cost for us. And then we have our low cost activities. So this is what we felt was basically the minimum responsibility, the minimum duty that we had to reach. So we have outlets like a city utility bill is included in here. One mailer to affected businesses, basically like the absolute minimum is one mailer to those affected businesses. And we've also prioritized here video production costs so that we can visually display what's going to happen, not just communicate it through static images that we know aren't as effective as video. And then we've also prioritized translation and interpretation. Again, a kind of bare basic need. We have to have everything translated and prioritize interpretation for any sort of interactions that we're going to have with the community. So in our medium cost bucket, the next highest category, we've included all of the no cost and low cost activities, plus sending one additional mailer to our affected businesses, and prioritizing 1 to 2 strategies from the high cost bucket. The reason they're separate from the medium cost is because these are the tactics we feel really prioritize that equitable distribution of information. So we've bolded the tactics that we're going to prioritize first. And if we have additional funding, for example, the business postcard estimates that we got were for a much higher quantity than we think we'll actually send to the number of businesses that we'll actually send the postcard to. So if we have additional funding, we'll prioritize some of these other tactics. But here we have outdoor transport ads. So these are bus shelters and benches. And then we also have some local radio outlets in the Fort Collins area that we would prioritize first. Next slide. So one of the challenges I mentioned is having kind of multiple goals for our shoppers, our shopping audience. So not only do we have a duty to inform them of the changes that are coming, but we also have something we want them to do, which is switch to reusable bags. So how do we marry those two things together? Well, we're prioritizing before January 1st, messaging that heavily focuses on the 10-cent fees that will be here for both paper and plastic bags, affecting more kinds of stores. This message is something that, again, is our responsibility to make sure people understand and know. And then the second message is to tie back why these laws and policies are in place in the first place, which is to reduce plastic pollution. So for this, we have our Bag to the Future campaign, which was used for our local policy and is being altered to fit the state policy as well. And we've included this tagline, reusable is the future, make the shift to reusable bags today. So we're really trying to push home that, you know, this is the way of the future. It's something that you can do. You can make this change, this shift to affect everyone's future in the community. Next slide. And then finally, this is a mock-up. This is definitely not exactly what will be sent to our business community, but just wanted to show an example of what that mailed postcard might look like. And we would have this both in English and Spanish, but just to inform them, hey, you may be affected by this. We have resources available for you. Here's where you can find those resources. But in addition to that, we are including a full media kit for all of affected businesses and also all of our partners, and we'll share this with other municipalities as well. And in that kit, we are providing digital files for signage, for social media, for newsletter content, graphics, and suggested copy alike. And all of these would point back to our fcgov.com/plastics webpage, where they can find additional information.
Thank you so much, Holly and Ashley. We are noting all of your questions here, and I think it's great that there's discussion going on in the chat. So please continue to do that, and we're keeping track of each question that's asked. So we'll make sure to get back to all of those answers. I'm going to hand it over to Jamie Harkins at the City of Boulder now.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's so good to virtually see you all. Jamie Harkins with the City of Boulder, but some of you may recall I was active in CML as the mayor of Lafayette up until December. So although my presentation today is from the City of Boulder's perspective, I can also relate to you from smaller communities that do not have current bag fees and what you'll be going through to collect that. So I just wanted to open with that. But I did work on implementing City of Boulder's disposable bag fee back in 2012 was when we developed the policy, and it went into effect July 1st, 2013. So we have coming up on 10 years of experience with this bag fee. It is currently at all food stores, regardless of size. So we are right now collecting it from 33 stores. So you can imagine we have had our own difficulties over in Boulder reconciling these two universes of stores. But that's another story. And we have similar language to the state bill, the 60-40 split as well as a similar exemption for low-income individuals. And that's just, I'll talk about signs later, but an example of some of the signage we put out for businesses back in 2013. Next slide. So here's our experience, which I always find that people are interested in what actually happens. We did have some modeling, as you know, to estimate. That was pretty accurate because back in 2012, stores were actually giving cities bag use data. We saw about a 69 to 70% reduction in bag use in that very first year. at our food stores. Again, this was just at food stores. And we went from about, 30 million bags, I think, to right now our fee is very consistent. That reduction we saw in the beginning plateaued, and it has stayed at the same level literally for 10 years. It can very consistently brings in about $65,000 a quarter for a total around $260,000 a year. So that can give you, some estimate for your community. 33 stores. We have about, I would say, 8 very large grocers all the way down to very small markets. And that's about the revenue we see, like I said, very consistently every quarter, with some swings for holidays, and, the summer dips down a little bit, but it has been very consistent. And we have seen very high compliance without much active enforcement. We had one case of a very large retailer that also sold food that we had to audit and do an assessment for about 5 years ago because they just stopped collecting it. But I am getting a lot of questions from cities right now about enforcement. And so I guess I just wanted to emphasize that it is going to be very evident in your actual return numbers if folks are paying it or not, or just like sending the minimum along. The enforcement of this law is on the cities. And so I just wanted to let you all know that, like, when you see the quarterly returns come in, once they become consistent, it's very, very evident if you have a non-complier, and usually it's an internal system or staff turnover, or it's something that can be worked out pretty quickly. But it has not been a big enforcement burden on the city of Boulder at all. So I just wanted to emphasize that. Next slide, please. And I threw this in here just in case folks were curious. This is our sample bag fee return form. I saw some discussion in the chat about how you collect the money. Ours is timed with sales tax, so they pay it at the same time. And we just did this very simple return form and asked them how many bags they sold, or, folks paid the fee on. So you'll get this in the slides. I just wanted to throw that in. So next slide. So our bag fee ordinance, because it was a fee 10 years ago, was very narrowly defined as to what we were able to use the revenue for. The good news for you all is that the PPRA allows you to use the fee revenue for a much broader set of uses, general waste reduction. Our lawyers were much more cautious, and we did do a fee nexus study. So we were really keeping the uses of the fee specifically to the impact of bags. But what is really great is that this revenue can pay for all the education that my Fort Collins colleagues talked about, communication. We did, when we were launching our fee, this was new back then. Folks weren't used to it. We did launch a really, I'll talk about it later, substantial education and outreach campaign. And we actually pre-spent fee revenue. So our city manager let us, pre-spend that money that was going to come in later quarters. So that may be an option for your communities that have budget constraints right now. But we did spend it on, setting up the system and collecting the fee. It has turned into a pretty low burden for our finance department. That will change now with so many more stores. So we're talking to them about using bag fee revenue to supplement their staff resources. But we haven't had to do that until now. So depending on the size of your community, you may find that it folds in pretty easily with existing finance processes, especially once it's going. We have spent a lot of money on reusable bags for the community, as well as our food banks. We do about an order every year, not too many actually, a couple thousand to our food banks, and we provide those to them. And they actually do see customers bringing them back. So it's been a really successful partnership. So we do that. We paid for I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the stuff you can do with this money. But we paid for an infrastructure upgrade at the Boulder County Recycling Center to try and help pull some of those plastic bags out of the recycling stream. You'll see here other infrastructure for our recyclers. And then we also have a program where we subsidize compostable bag liners, because we also have a zero waste ordinance for our businesses who comply with that. We use bag fee money to buy them the compostable, garbage bin, compost bin liners. So that's what we use the money for. But like I said, you have a lot more freedom to use it for other waste reduction programs, services. So we're really excited to see what folks do with the money. So next slide. So this is my experience with best practices, and it does echo a lot of what Holly and Ashley talked about. And this is a little different. I just wanted to acknowledge we were doing this at a time where businesses were new to bag fees. They really, the corporate headquarters were new to bag fees, quite frankly. So I had to work directly with a lot of the corporate government affairs folks at like Kroger and Safeway. And so it's a little different now in that a lot of those folks are already doing it or know this is coming. But I did do a lot of direct communication with the stores specifically, both through the city, and then we have a business advising team that kind of went out and helped some of our smaller stores get their systems in place, and then with partners as well. We did talk to the Restaurant Association a lot back in 2012. We didn't include restaurants in our bag fee, but we were exploring it. So given the other provisions of this law, excuse me, sorry, I would anticipate that you would want to, work with them to make sure that the restaurants know what's coming in 2024. And then, obviously our Chamber of Commerce was a great partner through all of that. I am sorry, I have a cold this week, so I'm sorry for my sniffles. And then, like Fort Collins, we had resources on a dedicated website that included all the signage a business could need: large format posters for by their door, smaller, this is example at the bottom, of the little stickers. We didn't print them as stickers. A lot of the stores did, for right by the point of sale. So, obviously our motive back in 2013 was to really make sure that the customers knew the city was imposing this fee, not the stores. So our signs were very bright and yellow and made sure to blame the city of Boulder for this 10-cent bag fee. We didn't want the cashiers to be taking the brunt of that. And we were able to mostly avoid that. So we really tried to provide the businesses everything they needed to make it successful. We had training materials. One of the best things we did, and I don't think we will be replicating it this round, is postcards. We actually printed up that consumers the week before the bag fee took effect were putting in, one per customer in the bag to let their customers know what was coming. So that was really effective. And then, of course, we showed them the sample collection form. Next slide, please. So that was more on the business side. Obviously, we did a lot more stakeholder engagement with them to set up the systems. It will be a little easier this time, given that it's statewide. And then on the community side, which Holly and Ashley did such a great job of talking about, really our duty to make sure the community knows what's coming. We used a fun tactic you may want to do, which was a community bag design contest. We had, kids, professional graphic designers submit designs, and we picked 2 of them on the green bags in that photo and use those. And I still to this day see bags out there with those designs. So that was really great and a good way to engage the community. And then we did do a lot of reusable bag giveaways. You'll hear that consistently from cities who have bag fees. We did table outside of grocers just for like the day of, maybe the day before, if I recall correctly. And then food banks, we did partner with like our Health and Human Services back pre-COVID when you had face-to-face intake. I'm pretty sure some of that is back now for housing support, public health. We gave bags to those folks as well. Anywhere that our community was interacting with the government, we made sure that they had information. And then I do think this is important. We are all living in a time of rising prices, higher grocery bills. So I think the messaging that we as cities use with our community is important. And that's, this is a fee that no one in theory has to pay if they have the information and have, the bags be prepared. So I just think that that's an important part to signal that this isn't, a mandatory fee. And, in our experience in Boulder, there is a segment of the population, obviously 4 million bags a year that will purchase them, but a lot of the community avoids the fee entirely. So I just think it's kind of a positive way to spin it if we can. Next slide, please. And so, for Boulder, the PPRA has some interesting impacts. And I just wanted to highlight how we're approaching it, because I do think there may be other cities out there listening that want to take an approach like we are. We have the small store exemption is really tricky, especially as you get to a little bigger of a city like Boulder. We have a very large store that uses a lot of bags, a hardware store that is technically a small store according to the state law, and then very small pharmacies that are technically a large store in the state law. So I just talked to council at the end of August to really figure out how we were going to reconcile, the fact that we're already charging the fee at some small stores. And just overall, it's really confusing for our residents to know where they're going to come across the bag fee and where they're not going to. So we are actually going to phase in on January 1st. Well, I'm going back to council actually tomorrow night for this, so the date may change. But a year later, January 1st, 2024, we're just bringing all the stores into our program, all the small stores across the city. And so we're giving them a little more notice, but we're just trying to make it much more consistent for our residents, because right now it's going to be a complete hodgepodge across the city, including some small food stores that were already charging the fee at. So that was our own unique difficulty, but you may want to think about that if you're a larger or mid-sized city that has some of these weird exemptions, maybe just bringing in all the stores through a local ordinance. So we are doing communication to all the stores, explaining, obviously this is tricky to communicate, explaining the exemption, and we're just going to ask them to kind of self-certify when they start based on the state law. We're updating all our signs and resources, doing more bag giveaways. We were lucky to have ordered, I know Fort Collins mentioned supply chain. We did a very large reusable bag order at the beginning of the year, and we just got them. So it is taking very long to get at least well-sourced reusable bags. But we did just get them. So they are at our food banks, and we are going to be doing those bag giveaway efforts. And then we're also exploring some options for, we all know how many bags are out there right now. And so already our council was interested in sort of some lending, borrowing programs, bag banks, just some more creative ideas around not giving out new bags constantly. So we are exploring that as well. And I think that's just my contact info. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I've been talking to so many cities about our experience. I'm trying to remember what comes up quite often, but I guess I just wanted to end with, I do think this will be a lot easier for all of you, given that it's statewide. And I had one final point, which was this is actually a significant revenue source for your stores as well. And so I think when you're talking and you're communicating to businesses, especially maybe some of your smaller ones that fit into the state law but aren't, big corporate chains, that they get to keep, 4 cents of this fee, and that can amount to a significant amount of money over a year. And so I know it's a burden to implement these systems and charge their customers, but I do also like to emphasize, and that was one of the reasons our council wants to bring all of our smaller stores in, was because it does provide that consistent revenue source to help them offset the cost of, paper bags or something more reasonable if they choose to. So just some messaging tips, but yeah, I'm happy to answer more questions after Marty presents. Thank you. And sorry again for the coughing.
No, thanks so much, Jamie. I appreciate you doing this while you have a cold.
Oh, it's fine.
All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Marty from the city of Durango, I think. There we go.
Hi, everyone. Marty Poole. I'm the sustainability manager for the city of Durango. So we are, as most would know, more geographically isolated, and we're the next size down smaller from Boulder and Fort Collins, about 20,000 in city limits, and then 60 to 70,000 here in La Plata County. So some interesting context for Durango. In 2013, City Council, during kind of the flurry of the bag fee, the start of the bag fee craze, our council did pass a 10-cent grocery store bag fee, modeled after Boulder and other communities. But then petitioners gathered over 500 signatures, and it went to the ballot and it was voted down. And so as soon as you say bag fee, for anyone that was here in this community at that time, to say, back in 2013, people voted down a bag fee here in this town. And you say, yes, I'm aware of that. And now it's a state law. So what are we going to do about it? So interestingly enough, there's a camp there that kind of really points to our local voters were not interested in a bag fee. But then there's also a camp of people that sort of doubled down on bag reduction efforts in our community in sort of non-ordinance ways. So sort of, nonprofit or local groups continuing this reusable bag efforts, kind of in the periphery of our community. So what's interesting is those folks in our community are actually super recharged by this effort, and I'll talk more about tapping into that that group of passionate individuals. Next slide, please. So when the city of Durango, when we're looking at the text of the law, as many communities where we're trying to figure out what this would look like to implement here, and to the point of what businesses were affected and how collections would be processed and these other administrative considerations, we took a look at, is there a way, could we bring a local ordinance that helped clarify some of these issues? And we were saying, is there anything that could be more effective through or clarified through state or local ordinance compared to the state law? And then is there anything that we could do differently to avoid confusion? To Jamie's point, the way the exemptions are written in the law, as many of you know, we have one of our 4 or 5 large grocery stores. One is independently owned, but it's big. And so they wouldn't have to comply. So there's going to be some confusion there. And then what if they do want to opt in some kind of way, like charge their own just self-implemented fee or something, so there's some weird confusion there. We were exploring all of that. Next slide. And so one thought that we had was we take this automatic exemption and we turn it into a request for exemption. So we take the same carve out language that a business that applies to the businesses under the law, but instead of it being this exemption be in place right from the start, it would be something that individual businesses would have to come, file a form with the city and request to be exempt. And then the idea there was that it still gives small businesses the opportunity to opt out, but we're creating a more even landscape throughout our community. And it was kind of inspired by, some have seen in the chat, Steamboat is looking to do just an across the board ordinance in their community. So that was kind of the big innovation that was floated. Next slide. And it didn't catch. So the local business community pushed back on that idea. Our business improvement, our downtown local business group and representatives, our local chamber, they didn't like that idea. So we dropped it. I personally still think it's a good idea for consistency and clarity, and addresses some of the issues with the carve-outs and confusion that can come from the state law. So I'd encourage other communities to potentially explore that as an option, but it didn't catch here in Durango. I also think just the general procedural burden of going through the ordinance process, that is something to consider. And so, you know, a new idea has to have enough benefit to the community to actually be worth going through that process. And so as it stands right now, we haven't come up with any local administrative fixes or local ordinance that seem necessary at this time to go above and beyond or create local, address local concerns. We're just going to ride along with the state law as written, and then potentially in the future, you know, maybe fixing that remittance timeline, try and get some of those funds earlier than the state law has on the books. So, you know, to be determined on the state of the potential for a future ordinance here in Durango, but as it stands right now, nothing. So where is Durango at in the planning phase? I'm maybe one step ahead of most people who are attending this call. A couple months ago, I would have not been presenting. I would have just been attending this webinar. So a lot of the ideas that we're implementing go right along with Jamie and Holly. Outreach to stores. We're a smaller community, so you know, that one-on-one outreach is going to be a little easier. Again, tapping into existing groups of passionate volunteers and folks that have been doing. I mean, we have a woman in town that at this point has so personally sewn, I think, over 1,000 t-shirt bags. And so, you know, asking her, hey, do you want to be involved in this process somehow? Local Boy Scout and Girl Scout troops, you know, being creative about that community outreach. A couple other ideas were a local bag brigade. So, you know, that idea of, you know, if there's an upset customer, hey, here's a postcard and sign up, you know, follow this link, sign up for this form, and we will have, you know, a local Girl Scout come and deliver you some bags, you know, if you're that annoyed by this thing. So I'm really trying to tamp down sort of the extreme reactions, I guess, to this, and trying to kind of bring everyone just kind of to a reasonable place on this. As far as the impacted communities, I had our business license pull a list. There's about 1,000 potential businesses, and, you know, a couple hours of just, you know, manual searching and tagging. We're looking at maybe about 50 affected businesses in our community. Again, 5 grocery stores, maybe a couple dozen chain stores, like we have a Tractor Supply and Home Depot. And then quite a few convenience stores and gas stations. I would say several dozen, you know, at least 20 plus in that area. And we're anticipating that those are going to maybe be some of the most challenging. And then we have some bags on hand, but again, echoing everything about the community outreach and just getting bags back out to the people so they don't have to pay this fee if they don't want to. And addressing low income, certainly from that equity standpoint. Next slide, please. It's not changing for me. Oh, there we go. So again, just repeating some of the stuff you've seen here before. We're gonna put up a website, put up some FAQs, you know, try and preemptively even get bags out to people before January 1st. Some of that reaching out to local GMs. A lot of these are going to be, you know, these statewide chain stores. They're probably going to be hearing about this from higher up in their corporate chain. So, you know, we're hoping that the messaging comes from both directions on that. And then firming up their fee remittance process, we also utilize MuniRev and just looking at the timeline there. We had a new account line set up in our accounts receivable system so that we can keep track exactly of what this revenue source is. And then my plan as it stands right now is to use some of that funding, in addition to buying bags and paying for mailers and postcards and things like that, To pay for additional hours, I have a sustainability intern position. And so going to direct hours from that position to a lot of this, go visiting stores, going and having these conversations. So kind of not true enforcement, but that first step of that education and outreach prior to enforcement is going to be filled by that internship position and those kind of one-on-one conversations. Next slide. And yeah, I think interestingly, we have a group of local businesses that want to take part. Like they're sort of bummed that they aren't included, that they're automatically exempt. And so kind of working with building up this local effort and kind of just homegrown effort to continue to reduce bags community-wide, even if there's a substantial amount of carve out in the state law. So that's kind of long-term vision of how to do that from that opt-in perspective and what that looks like for especially local businesses. Again, working with our local Visit Durango and destination management groups for visitors, and there's a lot of kind of related little pop-up efforts that have been going around in bags in our community. So just really, I think in long term, bringing those together under one umbrella of just bag reduction, so that it's not just all these kind of standalone efforts. Continue, and then in that line, continuing to get more and more bags out to the people, refine that enforcement process. Kind of, we'll just see what the first year brings, and who's having trouble from a store perspective, doing those collections and remittance. And then, yeah, long term, we'll just solve the plastic crisis as well. That's also on our list. So, but I think that is it for me. Yeah, but yeah, we're right there with y'all, and just trying to be as proactive and optimistic about this as possible, and see how it goes.
Thank you so much to all four of you, Holly, Ashley, Jamie, and Marty. I think this was a lot of really valuable information. And we have plenty of time for questions, so we will get to all of them. What I want to do now is, I know that there was a lot of questions about the local control aspect of the bill and how it can be enforced in municipalities and counties. So what I want to do is hand it over to Rachel Bender, our associate counsel here at CML, and she'll be able to kind of get into the weeds there a little bit. So Rachel, please take it away.
Sure. I think what I'll do here is I'm just going to give kind of a quick overview to hopefully answer a lot of those questions. And then to the extent that there are more follow-up questions, please feel free to add those to the chat if I don't touch on it. So there is no opt-out provision in this law. It is something that is just in place and subjects certain retailers to those fees. The intent is for it to apply to all municipalities. From a legal perspective, I do think that there is a potential position that home rule municipalities could take, that they are not subject to the bag fee. I can't, I'm not going to opine whether that is defensible or not, but I do think that there's an argument given home rule authority. And so to the extent that that's something you are considering, straying from the legislation, definitely talk to your town or city or county attorney about that. But I think that's something you can consider. For those municipalities that are going to, or are, statutory municipalities, what Megan referenced in here is that municipalities can choose how to enforce this. And so I think that's important for a number of reasons. I know there's a lot of small municipalities that don't have a lot of resources. I would note that a lot of small municipalities may not even have retailers or restaurants that are ultimately going to be subject to this. So it's possible that you may not have, this may be a non-issue if you don't have businesses that fall within this. If you do have businesses that fall within this, you can choose how to enforce it and how many resources to put towards enforcement. And, you know, I think there isn't going to be anyone from the state that's regulating this. There isn't going to be anyone who's, you know, following up with you. So it's really just a matter of how you want to handle things. And I don't think that there's going to be a lot of issues with however it is that you decide you are going to handle this. The other thing I would note for small municipalities too in this regard is, you know, there's talk about ordinances and those sorts of things. You can pass an ordinance if you want, but there's no requirement to pass an ordinance. There's really, you can just kind of say, if you have retailers that are subject to the fee, find a really simple, basic way to collect that money. It doesn't necessarily have to be a system. I'm hopeful that some of the panelists might have suggestions about systems if that's something that you're interested in. But this does not need to be something that is robust and overwhelming for small municipalities.
Thanks so much for that, Rachel. And can you just touch on more specifically for communities who don't self-collect their sales tax? I know that you alluded to that a little bit, but maybe just kind of call it out specifically.
Sure. And if I don't touch on what you're getting at, let me know. If you are a state, if your taxes are state collected, the state will not be collecting this fee for you. It is something that is solely run through the municipality and will not be through the state collected system. Just a note on that. I mean, to the extent that you have your own system and can facilitate collection of the fees through that system, I think that's fine. The one issue that may arise is that taxes are usually collected on a monthly basis, and these fees will be collected on a quarterly basis. To the extent that you know, I realize this may be more challenging for larger municipalities, but to the extent that you are a smaller community, I think that there's really room in this bill for you to work with businesses to try to figure out an arrangement that works for all of you. And so I think if you're in a small community where businesses want to remit, you know, I guess most small communities are going to be state collected, but to the extent you want to work something out that works better, I think that that's going to be okay, you know, in terms of looking at that timing of collection.
Thank you so much for that. So I think the other question that came up a lot in the chat is what stores are exempted from this, and it is only small stores. And I wanted to clarify that this is solely surrounding the bag fee and the plastic bag ban. So a small store, as defined in the bill, means a store that operates solely in Colorado, has 3 or fewer locations in the state, and is not part of a franchise, corporation, or partnership that has locations outside of Colorado. And I know that Jamie has had a lot of experience and has already dove into the differences between what Boulder has already been implementing and what the state definition of small store is. Jamie, can you elaborate on kind of an example? I know you had a pharmacy that kind of fit into that.
Yeah, actually, it was funny just for, you know, council. I worked with finance to pull a spreadsheet of like every business we have in the city. And I went through actually one by one, trying to figure out based on my own knowledge of living in the community, which they were in. But like, for example, we have 2 or 3, I think 2 now, 1 closed chains of Pharmaca, which is the small pharmacy, but you know, they have corporate headquarters in California, so, and chains in other states. So that's an example of a store that would not qualify as a small store. But as far as our analysis goes, like McGuckin Hardware, if you've been to Boulder, you may have seen that, is a very large hardware store, but it is independently owned, only location here in Boulder. So they do qualify as a small store. So that was the example I gave council of 2 stores who it doesn't, like, with common sense, makes sense to call one a large store and one a small store. It's kind of opposite. So that's my example.
And as for a little bit of background, this definition was provided by Good Business Colorado at the kind of last stage of passing this bill through. So that's where the definition comes from.
Yeah, it's more of like an independent store exemption is what they should have called it.
That's right. So I think what I would like to do now is kind of go through the questions that have been asked in the chat. David, I'm going to butcher your last name, I'm so sorry, asked, there's a small grocery store in our town locally owned, but I believe that they are part of a larger wholesaler. The locals owners have one store. Will this grocer be exempt? And as Jamie alluded to just now, likely that store will be exempt. Assuming the store is just obtaining products from the wholesaler and they're not part of that corporation or a franchise. So likely that store will be exempt. Next question we had was from Kelly Koski. Because this is not a fee, or I'm sorry, because this is a fee, not a tax, can businesses submit their payments through Muni Revs? And I do think that there was some discussion about Muni Revs in the chat. And I think if Holly wants to jump in and kind of talk about what Muni Revs is and how you guys utilize that for remittance, I think that might be helpful for some of the folks here.
Yeah, of course. So it's a system that our sales tax and revenue office uses. So they use it to collect sales tax as well as this remittance fee. It's a great system. The things that you have to do is you have to be, a user of this and pay into that. So we are signed up and using that. We have to create a different, we're going to use the same one from our local ordinance for the state for them to fill into, since it's very similar. Our sales tax and revenue office also prepared a form, and there's a link to do it all online for them to do. So it's really nice. I know that others have used it too, but it's been a great process for us. It's quick, it gives us a quick report, and they're really great to work with. It just takes some time to get all of those businesses in the system. So give yourself plenty of time if you would use it.
Thanks so much, Holly. And as Rachel stated before, if you don't self-collect your sales tax, you will have to kind of figure out the best way to go about collecting the fee. But I would really recommend figuring that out within your own city staff and then just communicating that with your businesses that are included in the bill. The next question I have was from Alex Nelson regarding some county questions. The state fiscal note calls out potential costs for transitioning detention center food service materials to compliant materials. And I want to clarify that section of the bill is regarding the styrofoam ban that is implemented in 2024. So that doesn't include the plastic bag fee and ban that we're discussing here today, but detention centers should comply with that styrofoam ban in 2024. And then let's see, we got self-collected questions asked. And then there was a question about, since this is a statewide law, whether or not the state will be providing any education or providing bags of the like. And I just want to be clear that the state will have no involvement in enforcement or education. But I know that our partners at Recycle Colorado and also at EcoCycle do have resources for cities and other local governments and businesses who want to comply. Liz, do you want to kind of talk about some of the resources Recycle Colorado will have for these folks regarding education specifically?
So at the moment, we are repeating what Fort Collins and Boulder and the other cities that have already done this. We're linking to their web pages so that people can use those things. Those links are also in the presentations that everyone on this webinar is going to receive. We have not developed any separate, we haven't developed anything separately yet, but that is something that we're planning on doing. Part of what we wanted to know is there a demand for that? And based on the questions I'm seeing in the chat, it sounds like that would be a useful tool for Recycle Colorado to develop. So we will start working on that and be sure that we share it out to everyone on the call.
Thanks so much, Liz. And Randy, I know you have your EcoCycle hat on today, I think. So
that is correct.
Go for it.
Yes, thank you, Megan. No, I just wanted to add that we are working on developing some virtual toolkits that will be accessible for cities. And those toolkits will be, I think, really geared toward businesses, towards cities and towards residents. So we plan to target those 3 different audiences. So we will be providing, similar materials you've seen today, but just to make sure that's accessible, and we'll be getting that out the door soon. So I'll be sure to connect with you, Megan, to let you know when we have those ready.
Thank you so much. And EcoCycle and Recycle Colorado were main proponents of 1162, so highly involved in this process, as was CML. So those are great resources to look out for going forward. And I'll also mention CML's also creating its own kind of sustainability waste management resource page, where this webinar will be accessible, as well as all of the resources stated above. And I just, Lindsay from Garden City asked, do dispensaries and liquor stores fall into this bill and gas stations? And they do. I think that's just the easy answer. Yes, they do.
If they're not if they're a single independently owned single dispensary or single liquor store, then they would not.
That's correct. Okay, and then there were some, I think we addressed kind of the enforcement, whether a local municipality, how they can enforce this bill, whether or not they can opt out. And if you have any other specific questions regarding that, please let me or Rachel know. There is a question here from Chandra Valenza. Is there a plan for grocery delivery? I know a lot of places are doing reusable bags, but then there's an overload of reusable bags. Has anyone come across that issue, grocery delivery and pickup with this situation? Jamie, you're nodding your head. I'm going to hand it over to you.
No, I'm nodding my head because I'm like, yes, that is an issue. We implemented our fee before, grocery pickup and delivery was a thing. Maybe actually Holly could talk to so far I'm not seeing a way around it. At least right now, I'm hoping to work with the stores to maybe try some innovative pilots of doing something different than just automatically bagging the groceries. But as far as I can tell, they'd have to charge the fee right now.
So you would basically just pay it along with your delivery fee.
That's what they're doing now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's just an equity concern if someone has to have groceries delivered or picked up, so we are working on it, but it wasn't an issue 10 years ago. So
right.
The tricky one.
So I think stay tuned on that. And if as we move forward and we get answers to those questions, we can absolutely send that out. And we have a document with who asked all these questions too. So Commissioner Scher from Eagle County, does the bill treat counties and towns differently in any way? The bill sets out a penalty schedule that is for counties. So specifically, counties can seek injunctive relief against a restaurant that violates the styrofoam ban specifically, or it can seek civil penalties up to $500, and it's tiered for first and second violations. And counties can also impose a civil penalty. Now, municipalities, again, have just the opportunity to choose how to enforce this law. So although it is laid out in statute for counties, it's not the same. That's not the case for municipalities. And that is the only difference between how counties and municipalities are treated in the bill.
Megan, if I can just add, municipalities, if you want to do the same thing that is put into the legislation for counties, you can do that. It's just not specified for municipalities, and you can choose how you want to enforce it.
That is correct. And Lisa Peering from Rangeley, can we review the bill and be specific on who is exempt from the bag fee? And I hope that we answered your question kind of at the top of this question and answer section, Lisa, but if you have anything else that you want us to add, please let me know. Or if there's anything that's unclear, let me know, please. And David Torgler from the town of Oak, will restaurants implement beginning in January of 2023? And I think I want to be clear that restaurants are not subject to the bag ban or the bag fee. Rachel, would this be a good time to talk about retail the retail service, retail food establishments versus what a restaurant is, and how, can you talk about that, please?
So the bill defines retail food establishment and stores separately. Stores include grocery stores. I think the retail food establishment is really intended to apply to restaurants. And please, to the extent anyone on here knows or thinks otherwise, please don't hesitate to speak out on this, because I do think it is kind of confusing given the definitions and overlap. There is the potential, though, I think, for overlap of some types of businesses to qualify as a store and a retail food establishment. And so I think just it matters whether you're talking about the polystyrene ban or the bag fee ban and bag fee fees, but really look at those terms, the retail food establishment versus store, and where those are used. And, you know, I think there might be situations where you'll have to address whether a business is going to be subject to it or not, depending on whether they fall into that category, store or retail food establishment. I don't necessarily have a definite answer, but I think that's something to be aware of and think about how you want to address it. And to the extent, again, that you're choosing to handle enforcement in your own way, you know, if there is an issue or a question, it's your choice about how you enforce that.
Clear as mud. No. But if you have any other if you would like us to go clarify that more, please reach out to us directly and we can hopefully help you and your city navigate through that. Tim Weitzman from Federal Heights asked, if the first remittance by store is April 2024, for the prior quarter, is it clear that they remit 2023 collections at that time? And so this is what I would advise all of the local governments is to communicate with your businesses that should comply with the state law, whether or not you will be ready to collect that fee in 2023 on a quarterly basis. So starting 2024, the legislation is clear that stores are supposed to remit by that time. However, I think the expectation of businesses and of local governments is that we will be ready to collect that fee beginning 2023. And as Jamie noted, they might not want to have that tax liability carried forward all the way till 2024. So we would just very much recommend clear communication with the businesses in your communities, whether or not you're going to be ready to collect that. And if you're not going to collect it in 2023, again, just communicate that and say, we will be ready to collect, and then when you will be ready to collect. And then there's a comment here from Sean Corzin that it's not a tax liability. So I don't know if we want to kind of get into that a little bit. Do you want to expand, Sean? Do you feel comfortable just jumping in? No? Okay. I'm not familiar. I don't know, Rachel, if you could. It's a fee that we'll pay on. Rachel, do you want to add anything to that?
I don't have any fee, not a tax. Yes, it is a fee, not a tax. So I think that hopefully that clarifies what the issue is. It is a fee, not a tax. I just wanted to add something, Megan, because there were some later questions about if you want to start collecting in 2023, do we need to pass an ordinance? Yes. And if we collect prior to 2024, can we use that revenue, or do they have to wait, and would they need to pass an ordinance? So I think that if you want to make it more formal to collect prior to 2024, it would probably be a good idea to pass an ordinance. I will say, though, that home rule municipalities will be able to do that. I am not sure that, I don't know that statutory municipalities would have the option to put an ordinance in place just because of when certain statutory provisions are in effect. If that's something you want to consider, certainly talk to your municipal attorney about it. I think you could try to do earlier collection on an informal basis if you were so inclined, depending on what your businesses want to do. But for home rule municipalities, I do think ordinance is probably a good idea, and I don't see any issue with utilizing the fee money that comes in prior to 2024, so long as you are following the restrictions on how that money is supposed to be used, unless your home rule decides to pass an ordinance saying something different.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that what is mandated in the bill is a fee begins in January of 2023 for stores. And they are not, according to the legislation, they are not technically required to remit that revenue to municipalities until April of 2024. Again, I think this is a very unfortunate typo that happened during a very busy time of the session. So those are the things that are actually mandated in the bill. However, there is latitude in the bill that allows local governments to communicate with businesses directly and let them know that you are prepared to collect if the fee on a quarterly basis. There is nothing in the bill that prohibits stores from remitting that revenue prior to April of 2024. And let's see, and I think we answered a lot of these questions. Let's see, do they need to? Kelly Hewitt, do they need to meet all 3 requirements, or does just one count to qualify as a small store? It's the bill language. I don't think, Rachel, do you want to take a shot at answering that question?
For the small store exemption, it has to be all 3.
Great. And then again, Andrea Phillips from Pagosa Springs asked, if you want to collect the fees starting in 2023, do you need to pass a local ordinance? I hope that has been made clear. You do not need to pass a local ordinance, but just rather communicate. If you choose to pass a local ordinance, that's great. Okay. What about, and I think that those are, we've answered a lot of the questions about what stores are exempted and included. If you do have any other questions, again, please reach out to us.
Can I add something on that, Megan? I know there's a lot of questions in the chat about, specific sort of circumstances of what types of stores are exempt or not exempt. And we've also been contacted with those kinds of questions. We really just have to keep falling back on the language in the bill, which is looking at whether typically the questions relate to, is this part of a franchise corporation or partnership or not? And so we can speculate on some of that, but we don't know enough details about each business to be able to necessarily give you a correct, so to speak, answer about that. So we can tell you what the statutory language is and, say we think this is what it will be, but we can't give you a definite opinion on that. And that's I think Marty kind of talked about the idea of having businesses apply for the exemption, because I think there are going to be situations where it may be challenging for you all to have enough information to necessarily know for sure whether a business is exempt or not. Perhaps you do have that information on businesses, but we don't necessarily have that to give you an answer.
And Rachel, have you touched on the issue of whether or not this fee can be taxed? Have we talked about that yet?
No, but I'm happy to give just a quick rundown on that. So the bill itself talks about the portion that the retailer retains as not being part of the purchase price or not being taxable. I know that, or like over the summer, most municipalities that I talked to and surveyed were not planning on taxing the bag fee. However, there are some municipalities, depending on how you define purchase price, what your tax code looks like, that you may consider the bag fee to be taxable. CML has created a model ordinance to exempt the bag fee from taxation. We are encouraging all self-collecting home rule municipalities to pass that. For those of you that are state collected, this isn't really an issue because it's not going to be taxed through this state collected taxes. But for home rule municipalities, please reach out if you haven't heard about this. And if you are considering taxation, we would encourage you to pass that exemption if needed. And we have that model ordinance language.
Thank you so much for that. One question here, are any municipalities requesting information from stores to estimate the 2023 bag fee revenue that will be received? I don't know, Jamie, Holly, do you have, or is anyone else on the call doing something like that? It doesn't seem like it. Okay. And I think that was all of the questions. Does anyone else have questions that were not answered here? Please feel free to use the chat or raise your hand. Here we still have 10 minutes, so we have still have time for discussion. Marty, please go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I actually, the issue of the local sales tax has come up here in Durango. And so, Rachel, just to clarify, we're among the communities that there doesn't seem to be a desire to impose local sales tax on the portion of the fee that the retailers get to keep. Can we just do nothing, or do we have to clarify in a local ordinance that we plan to not collect that?
I think it's something that probably should just be clarified to the extent that you can clarify with your municipal attorney. It depends on how your tax code is currently written and whether it would be considered taxable under your code. If you don't consider it taxable under your code, then I don't think you need to do anything at all. If you think it is considered taxable under your code, then that's when I would recommend passing the exemption or something like that to omit it from taxation.
Thanks. Roger, please go ahead. I know you had discussion in the chat. Do you want to go ahead and elaborate?
Thanks, Megan. I won't repeat all that. Just a couple of things I think we want to add to the mix here and perhaps pick up on the next time around. I mean, first of all, we attorneys know enforcement is everything. So if the state's not enforcing this at all, we need to be mindful of a provision in there that basically gives every locality full discretion as to how they enforce this, or theoretically or not. And we've got so many municipalities who don't have an ordinance in their, or any kind of program, that I think we want to allow for the possibility of some phase in, or some cities just aren't going to be ready on January 1st to do anything cohesive. And that many, as I mentioned, I'm working with Lakewood, many will face great opposition. So, people who know me know I'm the most vocal advocate of all, perhaps, about doing things like this. But through the process within Lakewood, I've been educated about how this is going to take some time. And so if you look at 2517-507 as the site, there is some discretion for cities, despite the fact that we have a statewide ban, to be smart about how they are going to do this in 2023, especially with this typo and the issue about the collection. Because while I think it's a fair interpretation to say you can collect, I could also see the other side, as many attorneys can, to say, look, the thing says it's collected in April 2024, what makes you think you can start collecting it now? If we do this, we get all the money. So a lot of issues there. And so, we already have a cacophony building, I think, in terms of different programs in different cities. It's unavoidable, and CML has done a great job of moving forward, but we're going to face, I think, some pressure within Lakewood and other cities to phase this in a manner that won't result in on New Year's Day 2023 bingo, the system's in place. So it may be useful to pick up with another webinar for those of us, many of us who are just totally new to any kind of program. And those are the comments. The second comment I had is, the preemption ban is critical to all of this. And so, Steamboat, for instance, theoretically, it's not legal to pass something before mid-2024. I mean, that's when the preemption ban is lifted. And, we could argue till we're blue in the face about that. And who, why wouldn't you do it? It makes sense. But strictly speaking, the preemption ban says you can make a more stringent program, but only in mid-2024. So I would recommend we pick up with this and a number of other issues that are going to continue to unfold. And I thank CML for taking the lead on this. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Roger. And I will note we're happy to still be here to help cities and other local governments implement this legislation. And you made a great point about the preemption repeal that is effective in 2024. And I think that's why CML was very much involved. Rachel, you unmuted, please go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna, I kind of alluded to the, preemption repeal not being until 2024 and about statutory municipalities as a result not being likely able to implement something prior to then, but that home rule municipalities arguably still have the latitude to implement something in 2023. That's or now.
Yeah. I want to give opportunity. We have a couple minutes left for anyone else who has a question that was not answered already. And if you do, speak now.
I have a question that's come up in our community and to see what the recommendation from other communities or CML would be. So as I mentioned, we actually have a growing list of local stores that want to piggyback off this program in one way or another. I have been telling them the best thing to do is just not use bags, just ban bags, don't deal with the fee or any confusion or anything, just say we are a bagless store. That's what I've been encouraging. But then we have some stores that are asking, they're like, I want to self-impose a 10-cent fee. So I'm going to run by my response and see if it's correct. I've been saying you can charge a fee for selling anything in your store, but oddly enough, then it would be like it's not a fee, right? It's a sale. So then strangely enough, that local store then is paying sales tax on a 10-cent fee if they want to kind of like align with the program. It's a weird, funky situation that's again why I've been saying just ban bags in your store. That's way easier, but
yes, City of Longmont, please.
Yes, thank you. I don't have a question, I have a comment. And I would like everybody on this call to, when you're about to implement something, to check on the demographics of your community, because it is important to tailor the message for minority-owned businesses and other languages. So I think it's critical. When we're designing all this messaging, let's be mindful of that. Try to focus on, specific demographics, because they're typically get left behind. They're not checking, websites. They're not checking the emails. They're doing some other media to get their news. So just a comment. Thank you.
An excellent reminder. Thank you so much. Any other questions or thoughts before we wrap up? If the state is not enforcing this, how do they know if a municipality is doing it? And Cindy, that's a great question. They're not tracking this, so they're not going to know. So I don't know. I don't know.
They don't care, right?
They don't care. And then Ryan, I don't know if the Broncos are going to win a game against a team with a winning record. We'll have to see. Maybe Chase Edmonds will bring some life into our running game.
I will preempt the Broncos to say, don't forget that we have the opportunity through this to go well beyond plastic and paper bags, that this is an opening for folks to adopt the skip the stuff type motif that Denver and others have taken the lead on. And we're looking hard at that, as a citizens group in Lakewood, to take this to council and try to be proactive about the broad preemption ban lift and the ways in which this could be applied to a number of different reduce motifs going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. And so with that, our time is up, and I'll wrap up there. I want to thank everyone so much. Thank you, Holly, Ashley, Jamie, Marty, for your very thoughtful presentations. And we, again, will be sure to share those slides and this recording with everyone who's registered, and we'll also have it available on our website. And I want to thank Liz from Recycle Colorado for being a part of this, and Daphne Gervais from CCI for also getting her county folks here to the discussion as well. And a special shout out to Randy Mormon from EcoCycle, who did very much help get this bill passed. So thank you to everyone. And again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly, and I will get you the right person. So with that, we're going to end our webinar. And thank you again.